I would not be here without people who have mentioned me in rooms that I was not in, people who have endorsed me. And that's just because I think I kind of allowed myself to be a student of those people and showing them that guys, I have this vision. Can you help me get there? And 9 out of 10 times you have people that will say yes. And those who say no, they're probably just not aligned with who you are. Read, if you're not a reader, YouTube, audiobooks, something. And start living in your vision now mentally. And and be patient with yourself. Yeah.
All right. So, are you ready?
Let's go.
So, hi, Gofaone. Thank you for actually making the time to join us today.
Hi, Nathan. Or Nate. Nice
Whichever.
to meet you. I'm happy to participate.
Yeah. I want to jump straight into it. So, you have a podcast called Conversations with Gofaone,
Yeah.
right? And I think that has been quite a powerful platform, especially for the younger generation, because you
Yeah.
get to see with these interesting people and have conversations with them. Just want to
Yeah.
ask, what inspired you to start it, and how has the journey been for you so far?
Yeah. So hi again to you and your
Yeah.
audience. And actually, funny enough, the data shows that our age range or listenership is between 18 and 44. So it's interesting how I guess the podcast or the content itself appeals to a generation beyond youth, which is what I appreciate about it. Um, how did I get into it? I think I say this a lot. I used to start off as a joke, but it's really true. I really didn't want to be discovered by Oprah because I love her so much. And I was like, girl,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
I'll
a
be
good
viral
goal
or
to
something.
have, and at least
Yeah,
something
no,
that you're pointing at.
it's so vain. It's so vain. But the underlying truth in that is that I was very much inspired by Oprah and the Oprah Show when growing up. And by the basis of my work, the work that I do, I always had this opportunity to be in spaces with incredible people, different industry leaders, and I thought to myself, it'd be so cool if the knowledge that they shared with me in this space would be translated to other people that are also as curious or may not necessarily be able to connect with these people. And so essentially, it was just to bridge this gap between people, industry leaders, and those who are curious about the industry itself. And because the podcast is not industry specific, so from entrepreneurship and innovation to mining, etc. So all of these industries, but strong with a strong African narrative, which is very important to me. And so the birth of Gofaone 3 years of Conversations with Gofaone took place 3 years ago. So it's all very exciting. 2 years, sorry, 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's how it started.
Oh, nice. That's interesting. If you
Yeah.
had one sort of like dream guest, who would that be?
On my show or
Yeah.
had already had.
And if you were sort of like a genie just popped out of the bar and
All
asked
right,
you,
cool. So very good. One alive now is Oprah. I just like I love Oprah. I love her
what you
so
love
much.
so much about Oprah, though?
I
Like,
think I think it's I find her vulnerability and just ability to believe in herself so important, and I also appreciate her. She's been through a lot, yet she didn't allow that to victimize her. And I think it's such an important quality, and I don't think there's anyone who's perfect, but for me, I appreciate that, and she's very strong in who she is. um and another one would definitely be Dr. Joe Dispenza, because I'm all about that metaphysics and just the power of the mind. And then one who's not alive anymore, I know you only asked for one, but bonus, is Dr. Wayne Dyer. His literature, or literary offerings rather, have impacted my life very strongly, second to the Bible. So I'd say he was, yeah, definitely, like they called him the father of motivation when he was still alive. So yeah, those are my top three.
All right, that's nice. Okay, that's nice. Kind of gives me a little bit of perspective on, you
The type
know,
of person I am, right?
you. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you've collaborated with, some big names and brands, for instance.
Mm,
Can you tell us what project or collaboration that really stood out for you?
yeah. One of them being the Forbes Leading Women. So this was our second year participating with them. And it was really me shooting my shot and not really being sure if they'd be open to it because I kind of came in with like two people listening to my podcast, and we started collaborating last year. And I kind of reached out because I was very curious about this whole Forbes Leading Women and the event that they do every International Women's Day, um and I reached out to them because Forbes Africa is a pretty big brand, and I was so impressed by the number of women that they had there, the caliber of women they had there. And it's been such an incredible opportunity to just be part of that, at the back end, and have content for my podcast. And the brand alignment does mean a lot to me, and it's something that I'm very, very grateful for. So this year again, this time they sent an invite, and I was like, "Stop! Thank you so much." I guess it's just a testament that you can never you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And I guess it's all embedding in yourself, which is very important. And I think another highlight for me was last year. There's this event. It's also hosted by Forbes, called the All African Business Leaders Awards. And there, I, for the first time, well, I guess it was just like a thing of manifestation in a way. So this gentleman was Mohammed Diji, if I'm pronouncing his surname right. So he's the youngest billionaire in Africa. And I got the opportunity to meet him. I didn't get to interview him, but I got to meet him at that All African Business Leaders Awards. And I just saw these people that I've always admired, from an African point of view, who are excelling in business. And you see all these millionaires, and you think, oh my God, I'm in the same space as them. So that's like top of my highlights right there.
Nice, nice.
Mm,
Have you learned anything from those experiences? Because I've sort of noticed that,
mm,
when you're standing on the outside of things, you kind of have a little bit of a different perspective or
mm,
paradigm on how things work. But when you get
mm.
into certain rooms and certain spaces with certain people, you kind of get a little bit of like an epiphany of, oh, this is how things work. This is cool. It's thing to know.
Yeah,
Have you had anything like that?
yeah. I think despite the fact that we all come from different backgrounds, it's learning that it's so important to be a master of your craft. Um, really betting on yourself, just really basic stuff, but it comes a long way. And being consistent. Consistency is key, but being consistent um, with some sort of method, just knowing what it is
Yeah,
that you want and being definitive in it. And funny enough, I think just being around people who are kind. Like, these people are so nice to me, and they have no reason to be like, they could be as mean as they want because of their financial status, but because they're so kind, it's made me kind of realize that there is, with greatness, there comes a level of awareness and empathy for humanity.
yeah,
And those are the traits that I've found very, very, very consistent across the board. And it really does take time, because there's being rich and then there's being wealthy. And I think with wealth comes with when you come to a point where you set up systems for legacy building. And these guys they've been in their various or respective industries for 10, 20 years. And then I kind of come in and I'm very impatient with myself, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 3 years. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But
yeah.
it really does take time. It really does take time. So these are the important things that I've learned, and I've learned a lot about myself as well in the process. I learned the traits that I didn't like about myself, that became very apparent. I didn't realize that I was probably easily intimidated, and I didn't realize it. Or learning how probably didn't trust myself enough. So sometimes I wouldn't offer my opinion when hearing things during a conversation. And I've kind of learned to grow from there. Because when you kind of talk to quote unquote great people, you don't really know like what's the language, what language do they use. Do you kind of interrupt them when you speak? Like, let's say they're taking too long on a point. How do you kind of say, I don't know, I hear you, but nah, how do you offer an opinion when you're talking to great people? Are they open to getting an opinion? And I kind of had to learn that, like, dude, this is your show. You can do whatever you want as long as it makes you happy. And I've kind of grown and being confident in this show of mine, and not really rushing the process, because podcasting is so weird, because like low-key I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm doing it, I don't know what it is. you know
Yeah.
1 minute it's like, oh, you should be this household brand name, or you should create a platform for other podcasters, you should do this. I'm like, guys, like, relax, I'm just trying to figure me out. And I personally believe, this is my personal thing, in having a natural growth progression, and it should feel right for me. So if it doesn't feel right for me, I probably won't do it. So try, and I've also learned to trust my intuition more. So those are things that I'm very, the things that I've learned along the way, and I'm still learning. And I'm just very, very grateful for the process.
Nice. I think I want to ask you something about social media, but just to highlight a point that you mentioned. So, like, podcasting is it's a really strange skill, but I think the only way you get to learn about it is when you start doing it, especially
Yeah.
like the point where you say cutting people off. Because like I'm sort of like a really good listener, because so I don't have the problem of interjecting too much. But there's certain points where the person would just, you'd feel like you want to jump in, or maybe the person has been talking for too long. There's some people that you could just leave them to talk and they will talk maybe for like 10 minutes straight, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, when do I jump in? But I'm sort of like a really nuanced tip is sort of like, if you're quiet for the entire time that they're speaking and you want to sort of like tell them that, hey, this is like, I'm about to go in, I would start saying stuff like verbally, um, verbally sort of, usually when I'm just listening, I'll sort of nod my head, but then I'll start saying stuff like, yes, correct. So it kind of feels like I'm trying to get in,
Yeah.
and
Have
eventually
has
they
there
do
been
kind
anyone
of,
that has there been anyone that you've interviewed that you didn't agree with their views?
yeah, there has been.
And then
Yeah.
how do you kind of interject while offering an opposing view? Or do you kind of just let it be because it's their time to shine? Or like, how do you kind of balance it out?
Um, I think I don't want to, you don't want to start a confrontation, but also interesting conversations come from like
Mm,
disagreement. You don't have to
mm,
agree all the time. So I would be like, I get your point of view, but from my perspective, I really think that, I don't agree with you on this and this and this
mm.
and that, or whatever. Or you could like tell them like, you want to play the devil's advocate, like you could,
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. So you don't feel a bit too threatened. You don't feel like it's your stance, but you could just say like an alternative stance would be something like this, and kind of see their take on it. Yeah. But it's a
Mm,
conversation,
mm.
so you can't just agree with everybody, obviously, with it.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so you're a social media manager, right? And I think, especially nowadays, social media is one of the things that are a little bit too necessary for businesses and people, personalities, and stuff like that. A lot of people don't really know what that means. Maybe let's start with how would you define a social media manager?
So I'm gonna define it on the basis of what it is that I
Yeah,
do,
in your
because
own, not like a
yeah,
dictionary
my own
term or
little
whatever. Yeah,
yeah, because you say you're a social media manager, and then people then want some level of social media marketing, and then you're like, no, that's not what I do.
okay.
But essentially, like, I quote unquote manage different accounts on various social media platforms. So from your content creation to your reporting and analyzing, and trying to find strategies for you to grow or connect with your online audience, and yeah, just kind of that, and seeing what we can do to humanize your brand or to make it more luxurious, or um, trying to see how we can see meet your target audience, if we're meeting our targets, etc. So that's me, as a social media manager, context wise. And so you'd find that we work with personal brands, so your executives who, so this is particularly for LinkedIn, who want a LinkedIn presence, either who are looking for some level of promotion, or who want to establish themselves as an authority, a thought authority or thought leader in a particular industry or in their respective industries. And yeah, so then we kind of tailor their LinkedIn, we kind of fix it up, so that we position you well. And then for businesses, so you have your small businesses and your much larger corporate, you'd find that they'd engage in a smaller agency like mine, for a particular campaign or for a particular project. And then they'd engage us, and we'd manage their social media accounts from there.
So let's say I'm a client, right? And I have like I don't know, like I sell fruits, for instance, and I sort of approached you with one of three things you would say I really need to have.
Yeah, you just really need to know which platform you need to be on. So typically, we'd advise them to be on both on Instagram and Facebook. We definitely tell them to create content, so we'd have to have them have like a certain, like a photo shoot, because in as much as people love to use stock images, they're not people can't really relate with those. I tell them that they'd need a budget for your boosting, for your content creation. They have to treat the social media marketing side of things the same way they'd view traditional marketing. So the way they spend money on printing flyers, going out, etc., they need to spend money on the social media side of things. And also, I tell them that it doesn't make sense for them to rely 100% on social media. So you do need to make supporting efforts, in the traditional marketing side of things, going out, going going to pop-ups, going to markets, being visible, connecting with your audience, and so connecting with your clientele. So kind of taking a picture with your clients or asking your clients to say, "Hey, since you bought these vegetables from me or these fruits, can you please post something or recommendation so that I can further verify what it is that I'm doing." And sometimes you'd find either very big guys that maybe are doing Tindering, or really, really small guys, kind of they struggle with seeing the value of social media. But what they sometimes don't understand is that the beauty of social media is that you're controlling your narrative. You're not making people tell the story for you. So if you have your own content, your own narrative, no one can say, and it's beautiful because you're able to kind of establish or track your success and say, I've been doing one, two, three, and four. Here's the proof. This is where I am now. But also in telling, being able to tell you a story is that instead of people looking you up because you probably don't even have a website, you don't even have, it doesn't seem as if, like, because people don't understand sometimes that if you don't have a website, like for example, I don't have a website yet, so I'm heavily reliant on social media. So when you look up conversations with Gofaone, you're going to find social media posts. And so I tell them that, for you to be discovered easier, and if you want to scale up, you do need social media presence. And so once they start understanding the purpose and the reason and have a strong enough why, they become less resistant to the work that comes after, which is typically your content creation, which a lot of people don't like. They don't want to be the
Yeah,
face of anything. But the truth of the matter is, people buy into the person more than they buy into the product.
yeah, true.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so this person is paying for social media, right? But now, how do you track returns on their end? Like, how would they know that it's working for them, for instance?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that as a social media manager, you also need to do sales and reporting. So reporting and analytics. So these things are seen when you're using, say, let's say, for example, you're using the business suite, and you're able to see how the ads are performing. You're able to see who you're reaching, and so typically, it's important for the person to say, "This is the amount of sales that I've had before. This is the amount of sales that I have now," and I'll say, "Okay, so these are the people that you're reaching. Is this your target audience, or are we kind of just shooting just for just?" And if they're able to explain that, and we're able to kind of see what's working and what's not, because that's the beauty of social media, is that we're able to track what it is that we're doing. We're able to see what our ROIs are. We're not just doing things just for the sake of doing it. We're able to see what leads we have and categorize leads. For example, when you go to Messenger, someone can pop in a question, "Hey, how much is 1, 2, 3?" That's a lead. And so we're able to say, "We've got 5 leads from this particular thing, this particular campaign. Did you profit from that?" "Yes, I did." "Fantastic." So it's able to kind of track it, as opposed to kind of just printing out a whole like 1,000 flyers and not really knowing if it's because, if you got the sales because of the flyers, or word of mouth, or because of social media.
All right. All right. Interesting. Um, yeah. So you would say your preferred thing would be Facebook, Instagram. The website is a little bit, that
Your
could come
TikTok.
later, and then TikTok.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, the website is, or the app, really. So those are like next level things when you're looking at expansion, or if you have
Yeah.
the capacity for it. For me, because I don't know, I don't think I'm a perfectionist, but there's something I'm looking for, but I haven't been able to define it yet. And so I was like, let me, and I'll just use myself as a case study here. But for me, it was just like, let me just kind of figure out what it is that I'm looking for, as opposed to rushing into things. Um, and so yeah, so I mean, the different platforms. Your TikToks are also very good. I think our generation is using TikTok like our parents would use Facebook, as a form of research, to be honest, or Twitter, and just kind of figuring out which platform works for you and why.
Yeah. Hey,
Mm.
that's nice. Yeah. So you do a lot of things, from brand strategy, innovation, applied research. How do you balance all of those at the same time with the
Yeah,
podcast and
yeah.
everything as well?
Yeah, I think everything good really comes from planning. If you plan things well, because actually I had let go of most of my team and started working with, not even most, yeah. I think I was left with like one person. And started working with freelancers, because I had to kind of really, and I guess people have different, it works differently for different people, but I wasn't able to justify having a team, or a set group of people that I employ and have to pay every month, despite whether these work or not. Nathan, I can't see you. I'm sorry. I don't know. Are we together? Okay, there you are.
Still
Okay, cool.
together.
All
Sorry.
right, cool. It's all
Yeah.
right. And so it's really, I really kind of challenged myself and asked myself, okay, but how hard can I work? Um, can I pull this off? And I guess I have, because you just need to plan well and kind of assign yourself, just really challenge yourself. And then that's what I did. I chose to challenge myself and still find time for rest. So I mean, it's really not as hard as I thought it would be, to be honest. I just started planning well. It just means that I work more hours, but it's all really worthwhile, because once you start planning things, okay, you have your different clients. And I had to let some of my smaller clients go, or those that I felt were a bit difficult to work with, and then started focusing, because most of the work that I do, or the jobs that I get, come from pitching. So there's a lot of pitching that I have to do as well. Um, but like it's really not that hard. Like, if you're willing to put in the work and plan well, and commit and not be lazy, then you're good.
How would you, if someone asked you, like, if you were in an event or something, whatever, and they ask you to sort of define yourself, where do you go first? To the podcast or to the, how do you define yourself professionally?
Um, yeah, I think I just I really it, ex- I have a hard time with that, because I don't really know. Because I also do moderating. So in defining myself, I guess defining my career or profession, it's on the basis of what the event is and what it requires. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm a moderator. Sometimes I'll say, "Oh no, I'm a podcaster." Sometimes I'll say I'm a social media manager and just kind of see what works because you don't want to start off making it seem like you do a gazillion things. Master of all. What is it called? A master of none,
Jack of all trades, master of none, or something. Yeah,
but
Jack of all trades,
of
master of
trade,
none.
master of none. Yeah, yeah. But how does the saying actually? Because there's more to the saying. Um,
I
but
think
better than a master of none, something like that. So
yeah,
it's better to be doing something.
something.
But yeah, all in all, I just kind of look at, I just describe myself based on that. But I really try to sell my personality more. And like I would typically casually just say I'm an awesome person. So what is it that you need? I probably can do it.
Yeah,
I don't try to put myself in a box that way. I don't consider myself necessarily a communicator either. I just don't think I have the skill set for it yet. Um, but I do definitely kind of, in terms of how I define myself, it's just based on what I'm passionate about, which is young people, advocating for young people and sustainability and walking in one's purpose. And I love digital, so all things digital also. Um, so yeah, so that's how I typically kind of go about it. Not necessarily saying this is what I do, but what I'm passionate about and try to find a synergy with that person.
I usually ask because I see at the basis of everybody, there's kind of like one thing from where everything else comes from.
Yeah.
They could end up doing a bunch of different things on top, but somewhere down below is kind of like one thing they
Yeah.
really, really love. I think for
Yeah.
you, it's probably communication and communicating with
I don't
people,
know, man. I don't know, Nathan. Like
Uh,
I don't know yet because
yeah,
I mean, you'd want to say there's a point where I wanted to say communication, but then I was looking at people who were actually doing it professionally and went to school for it, and they were killing it. And so I just kind of felt like I was demeaning or discrediting people like that. And so I just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Give me a few years and I'll give you a proper answer. But for now, I feel like I'm walking on my purpose. I feel like I've just kind of touched the surface of what could be. Um, and so in terms of the basis of who I am, I don't, it's undefined for now.
yeah. How does it feel like being on the other side of the interview seat, since you're
I
usually the
mean,
one interviewing
yeah,
people?
I mean, it kind of leaves you a little vulnerable because you want to cater for the audience, but also you're just like, oh God, guys, like I got nothing. I got nothing for you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I've messed it up. So I do have a lot of empathy for my guests on my podcast who are just like, how did I do? And I'm like, relax. So I try not to think about it because yeah, the overthinking me sometimes gets in the way. But I think it's cool. I think you're a great host. So courtesy of you. Thank you very much for being such a
Thanks.
great host. But I do
Thanks.
like being interviewed. It's a good challenge for me as well, and I tend to reflect a lot afterwards.
Yeah. I really don't think like the difference with podcasts, it's not necessarily like like a specific, it's not news where you go on news and then, you have to see a specific thing and you have to be, tailored up
Yeah.
and everything like that. It's kind of like
Mm,
just having a conversation, see where things goes.
yeah.
There could be a general theme in the background, maybe like social media or whatever, but then wherever the conversation goes, it just tends to go like, I think that's the cool thing about podcasts. It's kind of just like
Absolutely.
having a little bit of a peek into the other person's, you know, way of understanding the world, way of doing things. And yeah, it's not really
Mm.
that concretely serious.
I appreciate that also
Yeah.
about podcasting. I tend to tell my guests, well, just people who want to ask about my podcast. It's just that I prefer it because I just want the guests to know that I'm on their side. And I genuinely just want to know stuff. It's not as aggressive. It's not, as black and white. And for me, it's not journalistic in a sense of trying to get the core, try to be controversial. And that's not my MO at all. I don't want that. I just want a very kind an enabling environment for growth.
What do you usually want to know if you're meeting someone for the first time? What interests you?
Um, so typically questions that I would ask, and I've noticed this, it's just what people's leadership philosophies are, despite whatever level they're at um, in their organizations. So I'm always very curious about someone's leadership and work philosophy, how they view family, how they view life in general, how they view themselves. And yeah, it's just really more. I'm very interested in the core of the person, to be honest. And then I think following in is just okay. What industry are you in? Are you
Yeah.
into like energy transition, ESG, etc. So that comes way after. But if I do have an opportunity to kind of have like a really cash conversation with someone, I'm curious about the core of a person and then what drives their decisions. Not to be
Do you
deep,
feel
but yeah.
do you feel like people will allow you to go like too deep, or would they? Do you feel like most people are kind of just like at the surface, and it's almost like the longer the conversation takes, it's almost all the armor they have been wearing kind of falls apart. So do you feel like that's why with news, it's kind of like most of the news interviews are kind of like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I don't feel like you could go deep as you want to in kind of that short time span. But the more the
Yeah.
time keeps going up longer and longer and longer, it's kind of like um the walls people put around themselves kind of just fall
Yeah.
on their own. Yeah,
Yeah, I think I mean, on a personal basis where there are no cameras, I think it's quite easy to kind of get just, I guess it depends on one's level of consciousness and awareness in which they're living. But most people I've just noticed yeah, it's quite easy. I don't know if it's my persona or just like a 10-minute conversation for me or a 5-minute conversation, I could get like a whole lot about a person. But sometimes with the podcast, I try to avoid being personal. Um, I think that, yeah, that's not my, that's not what I'm about there. It's really just
yeah,
about the industry and how that person views that industry. But on a personal basis, I think sometimes I mean, maybe it's like the natural condition of human nature where we do have our guards up generally, and we're not the most trusting. And then as you keep going, then the scales fall off. But I think it's different. People are very different. And I think if you prompt the right questions, then you'd see that you get different types of reaction. But also, I think people are very energy based. So if maybe you and I like our energies just kind of clash, you probably won't get the best out of me, or and vice versa. So I
yeah.
don't think I answered your question actually. Was there a question, or was I just
Yeah, you
was that
did. You
good
did
enough? Like,
actually.
I don't know.
Yeah, you
Oh,
did.
cool.
You did. You did answer the question. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What is there something that you'd probably want to shed light on that I probably didn't ask you? Something that you're really interested in, which I did not get to ask you.
I don't know, right? I think you did good. I think you did good. I think the questions that you asked were perfect. Yeah, I got nothing, eh? I think this is all good. Like,
Yeah,
I'm sure your audience would appreciate it, and I appreciate it. So I'm happy on my end, really.
yeah. Cool. Awesome. All right. Is there anything else you'd want to ask, for instance, before I ask you to say your final words?
Um, do you kind of find Okay, so are there particular things that you or topics that you don't talk about in your podcast, and why? Like, for example, for me, I don't talk about sexual orientation and religion and politics because I think they're very complex, and I know that I'd be very biased. So I try to avoid those because I don't think I'd be objective enough. And I mean, they are necessary, and even like conversations on race, they're necessary, but not the direction that I want to take, because in as much as it brings in a lot of conversation, which and piques interest, it's just not where I personally would like the direction I'd like to go. But I do understand how important they are. So sometimes I find myself in this tug of war where it's like, but this is necessary versus, but will I um express it and justify it like in a just manner. So that's what I struggle with. So for you, what are your like never topics, or are you not worried about how people may view whatever
Um,
topic you choose?
Um, in general, I want to say no, but I think obviously sexual orientation, I wouldn't necessarily be interested in prefacing the entire interview, specifically on something like that. But also like religion, just because, unless you preface it, this is a discussion on religion. But the thing is with religion is not everyone have their own different moral standings. Like I could use the Bible as my absolute, sort of like to define where my
Mm,
worldview comes from, but then you're using something else. It's almost like there's no point in us having the
right.
debate at all, right? Because I would say, no,
Mm,
this is the 100% thing, and you just I don't believe it. For me, 100% is this, So it's
mm,
kind of like there's no point in having an argument in that regard. I think if they somehow tend, accidentally happen, I guess that's okay. But
mm,
I wouldn't intentionally like preface it on something specific like that. But in general, I want to be able to talk about everything. I think I I kind of I kind of feel like a lot of people have different facets, and a lot of people have different interests in different things. You
mm,
could see a software engineer, having a company, and then it feels like that's the only thing that that person focuses
mm,
on. But then when you get to speak with this person, it's kind of like they're really interested in politics, and they have a really cool worldview and paradigm of the world. And it's kind of like it's a little bit strange and interesting, getting to dig that deep into people's
mm,
worldview and things like that. And I think that's probably
yeah,
where most of the cool conversations and interactions happen. It's in that space because people don't really get to have conversations like that. If they do
yeah,
get to have it, it's kind of like in isolation, just between two friends
yeah,
and stuff,
yeah,
but not
mm,
in public. And I do understand it could be a little bit difficult to just. It's kind of like if you were having a therapy session, you wouldn't want to have that recorded, right? Because it's kind of like it digs too deep into who you are.
mm,
So they obviously would be things that people wouldn't want to share, but the deeper you go with people, those usually tend to be interesting
yeah,
conversations. Yeah.
100%. That's all.
Alrighty. So, what is any advice you'd want to give to, any young person that's trying to get into, I guess, broadcasting or social media managing or anything that's brand related or anything that you did, following your footsteps, for instance?
Yeah, give yourself a shot. Networking is key. So these are things that I did for myself. So really just kind of believing in myself. And I just don't want to believe in myself in a sense of really betting on who I am. So investing in reading, investing in being in the right spaces, being with the right people, whether you call it mentoring or just kind of learning from people that I have access to. Um, when I kind of started, I wasn't really sure what direction I was going. So just kind of not, I'd say also not just have English. Yeah. Just really
Yeah.
have grace for yourself and allow yourself to make a mistake. Don't expect perfection on the first try. My first episode's audio was terrible, and I still get comments on that. Oh, why don't you use a mic? Why didn't you? And I'm like, guys, I didn't have those resources, but I'm keeping those there because the
Yeah.
content was good. I just felt like I deserve to give myself a shot, and I don't care. I'm not a perfectionist, so just give it a shot and advertise the hell out of your podcast. I was like trying to feature on like newspapers and magazines, and I was there.
Yeah.
I was going to those networking events because essentially you do want to monetize from the podcast. So yeah, so that's the advice I'd give. Find yourself either a mentor or a sponsor. For me, I'm at a point where I'm not necessarily looking for mentorship, but I do appreciate the people that take time. I guess maybe it is a level of mentorship of sorts. Just taking people who are taking the time to kind of really invest in me, and getting a sponsor. So a sponsor is someone who would endorse you, and kind of say your name in rooms that you're not able to be in. So for me, I've noticed that sponsorship in that sense is a very important part of my growth. I would not be here without people who have mentioned me in rooms that I was not in, people who have endorsed me. Um, and that's just because I think I kind of allowed myself to be a student of those people and showing them that I have this vision. Can you help me get there? And 9 out of 10 times, you have people that will say yes. And those who say no, they're probably just not aligned with who you are. Read, if you're not a reader, YouTube, audiobooks, something. and and start living in your vision now mentally. And yeah, and be patient with yourself.
Yeah, awesome, cool. And where can people find you? I know that they want you, but maybe I'll let you say it.
Yeah, just check me out like on my social media. So I'm practically on Instagram. I'm Gofaone Modise 1. So that's GOFAONE MODISE 1. And then on LinkedIn, it's Gofaone Modise.
Awesome. Thanks, Bonnie. This was really cool.
Cool. You were a great host. Thanks for having me.
For sure.
Awesome.
Right. And